He had everything: money, power, respect. A mansion that looked like a dream and a woman who seemed perfect by his side. But behind the expensive walls and fake smiles, his sick mother was being tortured every single day. The one person who saw it all was the quiet housekeeper everyone ignored. She wasn't educated. She wasn't wealthy. She was just kind. And when she finally stood up and exposed the truth in front of a room full of important people, no one could look away. What happened next destroyed reputations, broke engagements, and proved that sometimes the smallest voice carries the biggest truth. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. And please, comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Michael Harrison was the kind of man people wrote articles about. At 38 years old, he owned one of the largest real estate companies in the state. His face appeared in business magazines. His name was mentioned at charity galas. He wore custom suits, drove cars most people only saw in movies, and lived in a mansion that sat on 20 acres of private land. The estate had everything: a pool with waterfalls, a tennis court, gardens designed by professionals, security gates that opened with a code. Inside, the floors were marble. The furniture was imported. Every room looked like it belonged in a luxury catalog. Visitors always left impressed, talking about how successful Michael was, how perfect his life seemed. But they didn't live there. They didn't see what happened when the guests left and the doors closed. Michael's days were full. Meetings, calls, contracts, investments. He traveled often, sometimes for weeks. When he was home, he spent most of his time in his office or entertaining business partners. He was good at making money. He was good at making deals. But he wasn't good at noticing what was happening in his own house. He thought everything was fine because it looked fine. And that was his mistake. Michael's mother, Eleanor Harrison, lived in the east wing of the mansion. She was 72 years old, and 3 years ago, she had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. At first, it was small things. She forgot names. She repeated herself. She lost track of time. Michael had taken her to the best doctors. They ran tests, prescribed medications, and gave advice. But there was no cure. The disease was progressive. It got worse slowly, month by month. Eleanor had once been a strong woman. She raised Michael alone after his father died when he was young. She worked 2 jobs to put him through school. She taught him discipline, respect, and how to dream big. Michael owed everything to her. But now, she was different. Her memory faded. Some days she didn't recognize people. Other days she thought she was in a different time, talking to people who had been dead for years. She became confused easily. Loud noises scared her. Crowds overwhelmed her. She needed patience, gentleness, and constant care. Michael hired nurses at first. But they came and went. Some couldn't handle the repetitive questions. Others found the job too emotionally draining. Eleanor didn't connect with any of them. She became more withdrawn, more anxious. Michael didn't know what to do. He was busy. He didn't have time to care for her himself. So he kept hiring people, hoping someone would stick. That's when Sarah Martinez became more than just the housekeeper. Sarah had worked in the Harrison mansion for 5 years. She was 43 years old, with dark hair she kept tied back, warm brown eyes, and a calm presence. She didn't come from money. She grew up in a small apartment with her mother and 2 brothers. She started working young, cleaning houses, doing laundry, cooking meals for families who could afford help. She was used to being invisible. People looked past her, through her, like she was part of the furniture. And she was fine with that. She didn't need attention. She just needed honest work. When Sarah first started at the mansion, her job was simple: clean the rooms, organize the kitchen, make sure everything stayed neat. But as Eleanor's condition worsened and the nurses kept leaving, Sarah started spending more time with her. At first, it was just checking on her between tasks, bringing her tea, making sure she ate. But Sarah noticed how scared Eleanor looked when she was alone. How she would sit in her chair staring at nothing, confused and lost. Sarah's own mother had passed away from cancer years ago, and she remembered how frightening it was to feel helpless. She saw that same fear in Eleanor's eyes. So Sarah started doing more. She would sit with Eleanor in the afternoons and talk to her gently. She learned that speaking slowly and clearly helped. She discovered that Eleanor loved old songs, so she started playing them softly in the background. She noticed that routines made Eleanor feel safe, so she kept everything consistent. Same time for meals. Same walking path through the garden. Same bedtime ritual. Sarah wasn't a trained caregiver, but she cared. And sometimes, that mattered more than training. Sarah read books about Alzheimer's at night in her small room. She watched videos online about how to communicate with people who had memory loss. She learned not to correct Eleanor when she got confused, but to gently guide her back. She learned to stay calm when Eleanor got frustrated or scared. She learned that touch mattered, holding her hand, brushing her hair, sitting close. These small acts of kindness made Eleanor feel less alone. Michael noticed the change. His mother seemed calmer when Sarah was around. She ate better. She smiled more. She didn't cry as much. So without officially changing Sarah's title or pay, he quietly let her take on more responsibility. Sarah didn't mind. She had grown to love Eleanor. The old woman reminded her of her own mother, and caring for her filled a space in Sarah's heart that had been empty for a long time. Eleanor started calling Sarah by her name, then started reaching for her when she felt scared. Some nights, Eleanor would whisper, "Don't leave me," and Sarah would stay until she fell asleep. To Eleanor, Sarah wasn't just the housekeeper. She was safety. She was trust. She was the only constant in a world that kept shifting and confusing her. Sarah's days became long. She woke up early to prepare Eleanor's breakfast. She helped her bathe and dress. She walked with her in the garden. She read to her. She sat with her during meals. She cleaned up after her when she spilled things or forgot how to use a fork. She stayed patient when Eleanor asked the same question 10 times in an hour. And at night, when Eleanor was finally asleep, Sarah would go back to her room exhausted but somehow fulfilled. She didn't do it for praise. She didn't do it for extra money. She did it because it was right. Because Eleanor deserved dignity and kindness. Because no one else was doing it. Then Jessica Kane entered the picture. Jessica was 29 years old, tall, blonde, and beautiful in the way that made people turn and stare. She had perfect skin, perfect teeth, and a perfect smile that she used like a weapon. She met Michael at a charity event 2 years ago. She was there representing a fashion brand, modeling their new line. Michael was there as a donor. They were introduced by a mutual friend, and Jessica made sure to leave an impression. She laughed at his jokes. She asked about his business. She touched his arm when she spoke. Within weeks, they were dating. Within a year, they were engaged. Jessica moved into the mansion 6 months before the engagement. Michael thought she was everything he wanted. She was charming, confident, and fit perfectly into his world. She knew how to dress for events. She knew how to talk to his business partners. She looked good in photos. On paper, she was the ideal partner. But Jessica had a different side. A side Michael never saw. Jessica didn't care about Eleanor. From the beginning, she saw the old woman as a problem. An embarrassment. A burden. She didn't understand why Michael kept his mother in the house instead of putting her in a facility. She thought it made him look weak, sentimental. But she never said that to him. When Michael was around, Jessica played the role perfectly. She would greet Eleanor sweetly, call her mom, and offer to help with small things. She would smile and say things like, "How are you feeling today?" or, "Let me get that for you." Michael believed she was kind. He thought Jessica and his mother were building a relationship. He had no idea it was all an act. The moment Michael left the house, Jessica's mask came off. She avoided Eleanor completely. If Eleanor tried to speak to her, Jessica would ignore her or walk away. If Eleanor entered a room where Jessica was sitting, Jessica would leave. She treated Eleanor like she was invisible, like she didn't exist. And when she did acknowledge her, it was with irritation and coldness. Sarah noticed it immediately. At first, she thought maybe Jessica was just uncomfortable around illness. Some people were. But as time went on, Sarah realized it was more than discomfort. It was disgust. Jessica didn't see Eleanor as a person. She saw her as an obstacle, something in the way of the life she wanted. One afternoon, Eleanor shuffled into the living room where Jessica was looking at wedding magazines. Eleanor smiled and said, "Are you planning something nice?" Jessica didn't even look up. "This. Something you won't be part of." Eleanor blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Jessica sighed loudly, closed the magazine and stood up. "I mean, you're not going to be at my wedding. You'll probably forget it's even happening." She walked out, leaving Eleanor standing there alone, hurt and confused. Sarah had been in the hallway and heard everything. Her chest tightened with anger, but she didn't say anything. Not yet. She went to Eleanor and gently guided her to sit down. "Don't worry about her," Sarah said softly. "Let's have some tea." Eleanor nodded, but her eyes were sad. Jessica's behavior got worse over time. She started making comments when Michael wasn't around. If Eleanor repeated herself, Jessica would snap, "You already said that 5 times. Can you stop?" If Eleanor got confused about where she was, Jessica would mock her. "You live here. How do you keep forgetting that?" When Eleanor struggled to eat or dropped food, Jessica would roll her eyes and mutter, "This is disgusting." She never raised her voice loud enough for Michael to hear, but the words cut deep. Eleanor started becoming quieter. She stopped asking questions. She stopped trying to join conversations. She would sit in her chair with her head down, afraid to do anything that might upset Jessica. Sarah watched it all happen and felt helpless. She wanted to tell Michael, but she was afraid. Jessica had power in this house. She was going to be Michael's wife. If Sarah accused her without proof, who would Michael believe? The successful, beautiful woman he loved? Or the quiet housekeeper? Sarah wasn't sure. So she stayed silent, but she stayed close to Eleanor. She became a shield between Eleanor and Jessica as much as she could. When Jessica entered a room, Sarah made sure to be there too. When Jessica said something cruel, Sarah would gently distract Eleanor and move her somewhere else. She started keeping Eleanor in her room more often, where it was safe, where Jessica rarely went. But Sarah couldn't be everywhere at once. And the cruelty continued. The mansion itself reflected the hidden tension. To visitors, it was pristine. Clean, organized, beautiful. But inside, there were 2 worlds. The world Michael saw, where everything seemed fine, and the world that existed when he wasn't looking, where cruelty and pain lived in the corners. The staff knew. The cook knew. The gardener knew. But no one said anything. Jobs like this were hard to find, and no one wanted to risk getting fired by speaking up. So the silence continued. Jessica kept playing her role perfectly when Michael was home. She would kiss him at the door. She would sit beside him at dinner and laugh at his stories. She would talk about wedding plans and their future together. Michael believed he had found the perfect partner. Someone who understood his world. Someone who made his life easier. He was blind to what was really happening. One evening, Michael came home early from a meeting. He walked into the house and heard soft music coming from Eleanor's room. He walked down the hallway and stopped at the door. Through the crack, he saw Sarah sitting beside his mother on the bed. Eleanor was leaning against her, and Sarah was gently brushing her hair, humming along to the music. Eleanor looked peaceful. Michael stood there watching for a moment. He realized he hadn't seen his mother look that calm in months. Maybe years. He saw the way Eleanor held onto Sarah's hand like she was holding onto life itself. And he saw the patience, the tenderness, the love in the way Sarah cared for her. Something stirred inside him. Guilt. Realization. He had been so focused on his business, on his life, on Jessica, that he had stopped seeing his own mother. He had left her care to someone else and assumed everything was fine. But watching Sarah in that moment, he understood. His mother wasn't just being taken care of. She was being loved. And he hadn't been the one doing it. Michael quietly stepped back and walked to his office. He sat at his desk and stared at nothing for a long time. He thought about his mother, about how strong she used to be, about everything she sacrificed for him. And he thought about Sarah, a woman he barely spoke to, a woman he saw as just part of the household staff. But she was doing something he should have been doing. She was protecting his mother. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what he had seen. He thought about Jessica. He tried to remember the last time she had spent real time with his mother. He couldn't. She always had an excuse. She was busy planning the wedding. She had appointments. She didn't feel well. He had never questioned it. But now, a small doubt began to form in his mind. Was everything really as perfect as it seemed? The mansion was quiet that night. Eleanor slept peacefully in her room, Sarah in hers. Jessica was in the master bedroom scrolling through her phone, planning her perfect future. And Michael sat in his office, staring at old photos of his mother, wondering when he had stopped really seeing her. The truth was closer than he thought. It was waiting in the shadows, in the moments he wasn't there to witness. And soon, it would come crashing into the light. The tension in the mansion grew thicker each day. On the surface, everything looked the same. Michael went to work. Jessica planned the wedding. Sarah took care of Eleanor. But beneath that calm surface, something dark was building. Sarah had started noticing patterns in Jessica's behavior. It wasn't random cruelty anymore. It was calculated. Jessica knew exactly when Michael would be gone and for how long. She knew which rooms had cameras and which didn't. She knew how to time her words so that no one important would hear. And she was getting bolder. One morning, after Michael left for a 3-day business trip, Jessica's true nature came out in full force. Eleanor had woken up confused, thinking it was 20 years earlier. She kept asking for her husband, Michael's father, who had been dead for over 2 decades. Sarah was helping her get dressed when Eleanor started getting upset. "Where is he?" Eleanor asked, her voice rising with panic. "He should be home by now. Did something happen?" Sarah spoke softly, trying to calm her. "Everything's okay, Eleanor. Let's just focus on getting you ready for breakfast." But Eleanor wouldn't let it go. She became more agitated, her hands shaking as she tried to button her shirt. Sarah gently took over, buttoning it for her while speaking in soothing tones. "We'll have a nice breakfast, and then maybe we can walk in the garden. The flowers are beautiful right now." Jessica appeared in the doorway, already dressed in expensive athleisure wear, her hair perfect, her face cold. "What's all the noise about?" she asked, though she clearly didn't care about the answer. Eleanor turned to her, confused. "Have you seen my husband? I can't find him." Jessica's face twisted with disgust. "Your husband is dead. He's been dead for years. How many times do we have to go through this?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "Jessica, please. She's having a difficult morning." Jessica ignored her. She walked closer to Eleanor and spoke slowly, mockingly, like she was talking to a stupid child. "Husband. He's not coming back. Ever. Can you understand that?" Eleanor's face crumpled. Tears filled her eyes. She looked down at her hands, trembling. "Dead?" she whispered. Sarah stepped between them. "That's enough. You need to leave." Jessica's eyes flashed with anger. "Excuse me? You're telling me what to do." Sarah stood her ground. "I'm asking you to stop upsetting her. She can't help what she remembers or forgets." Jessica laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "She can't help anything, can she? She's useless. She doesn't even know what year it is. And you're here babying her like she's some precious thing. She's not. She's a sick old woman who should be in a home somewhere." Sarah felt rage boiling inside her, but she kept her voice steady. "She's Michael's mother. She deserves respect." Jessica stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Michael isn't here. And when he's not here, I'm in charge. Not you. You're just the help. Don't forget that." She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Eleanor was crying softly now, her hands covering her face. Sarah sat beside her and pulled her into a gentle embrace. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here. You're safe." But even as she said the words, Sarah felt a deep sense of dread. This wasn't going to get better. It was going to get worse. Over the next few days, Jessica's cruelty escalated. She started giving orders to the staff about Eleanor without consulting Sarah. She told the cook to stop making Eleanor's favorite meals. She doesn't even remember what she ate 5 minutes ago. Why waste good food? She instructed the gardener to stop letting Eleanor walk through certain parts of the garden. She wanders around like a lost dog. It's embarrassing if anyone sees her. She even had Eleanor's favorite chair removed from the living room because she said it clashed with the new decor she was planning. When Sarah protested, Jessica shut her down immediately. "Are you the interior designer? So stay out of it." Eleanor noticed the changes. She would look for her chair and not find it. She would ask for certain foods and be told they weren't available. She started feeling like a stranger in her own home. She became more withdrawn, more quiet, more fearful. She stopped asking questions because every question seemed to upset someone. She stopped expressing needs because her needs were treated like burdens. Sarah watched Eleanor shrinking into herself, and it broke her heart. She tried to compensate by spending even more time with her, by making her room a safe haven, by giving her as much comfort as she could. But it wasn't enough. Eleanor was suffering, and Sarah felt powerless to stop it. One afternoon, Sarah found Eleanor sitting in the hallway outside her room, crying. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside her. Eleanor looked up with red, swollen eyes. "I don't know where I belong anymore. Everyone's angry with me, but I don't know what I did wrong." Sarah's chest ached. "You didn't do anything wrong. You belong here. This is your home." But even as she said it, Sarah knew it didn't feel like home anymore. Not for Eleanor. Jessica's manipulation went beyond just words. She started isolating Eleanor intentionally. When friends of Michael's came to visit, Jessica made sure Eleanor was kept upstairs. "She's resting," Jessica would say with a fake smile. "She's not feeling well today." But Eleanor wasn't resting. She was sitting alone in her room, wondering why no one wanted to see her. When family members called to check on her, Jessica would intercept the calls. "She's doing fine," she'd say brightly. "Just a little tired. I'll tell her you called." But she never did. Eleanor began to believe that no one cared about her anymore. That she had become invisible. Forgotten. Sarah tried to counter this by telling Eleanor stories, showing her old photo albums, reminding her of happy times. But the damage was being done. Jessica was erasing Eleanor from the household piece by piece, and no one with the power to stop it was paying attention. One evening, Sarah was cleaning up after dinner when she overheard Jessica on the phone in the study. The door was slightly open, and Jessica's voice carried into the hallway. I know, Jessica was saying, her tone casual and cold. "She's still here. Michael refuses to put her in a facility. It's so frustrating. I can't plan anything with her lurking around like a ghost." There was a pause as the person on the other end responded. Jessica laughed. "No, he doesn't see it. He thinks I'm being patient and kind. He has no idea. I just avoid her when he's gone and play nice when he's home. It's exhausting, but it won't be forever. Once we're married and I have more control, I'll convince him to move her out. Then we can finally have the house to ourselves." Sarah's hands froze. She stood in the hallway, her heart pounding. Jessica wasn't just being cruel. She was planning to get rid of Eleanor entirely. She was manipulating Michael, playing a long game, and Eleanor was the target. Sarah stepped back quietly and returned to the kitchen. Her mind raced. She had suspected Jessica was terrible, but hearing it spoken so plainly, so casually, was something else. Jessica didn't see Eleanor as a person. She saw her as an obstacle to remove. Sarah knew she had to do something. But what? She couldn't just tell Michael. He was blinded by love, by Jessica's perfect act. He wouldn't believe her without proof. And even if he did, Jessica would twist it, make Sarah look jealous or unstable. Sarah needed evidence. Something undeniable. That night, Sarah sat in her small room with a notebook and pen. She started writing down everything she had witnessed. Dates, times, things Jessica had said and done. She wrote about the chair being removed, the meals being changed, the phone calls being intercepted. She wrote about the cruel words, the mocking tone, the way Eleanor had started to fade under Jessica's treatment. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Sarah also decided to start recording when she could. She had an old phone with a voice recorder app. It wasn't sophisticated, but it would work. If she could catch Jessica saying something cruel, something revealing, maybe that would be enough to make Michael see the truth. But Sarah had to be careful. If Jessica found out, Sarah would lose her job. And worse, Eleanor would lose her only protector. The next few days were tense. Sarah moved through the house like a spy, always watching, always listening. She kept her phone in her pocket, ready to record at any moment. Jessica seemed to sense something was different. She started watching Sarah more closely, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You're awfully quiet lately," Jessica said one morning as they passed in the hallway. Sarah kept her expression neutral. "Just doing my job." Jessica tilted her head. "Make sure that's all you're doing." The threat was clear. Sarah nodded and walked away, her heart racing. She was playing a dangerous game, but she couldn't stop now. Eleanor needed her. Then came the incident that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon. Michael was out of town again, this time for a week-long conference. Jessica had been in a particularly bad mood all day, snapping at the staff and complaining about everything. Eleanor had been having a rough day too. She kept forgetting where she was and asking for people who weren't there. Sarah had been with her most of the day, keeping her calm and comfortable. In the late afternoon, Eleanor wanted to go to the bathroom. Sarah helped her walk there and waited outside. A few minutes passed, then Sarah heard a crash and a cry. She rushed in and found Eleanor on the floor. She had slipped trying to stand up from the toilet. "Are you hurt?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside her. Eleanor was shaken but didn't seem injured. "I don't know. I just fell." Sarah carefully helped her up, checking for injuries. Eleanor seemed okay, just frightened. Sarah got her cleaned up and helped her back to her room. But Jessica had heard the noise and came to investigate. She stood in the doorway of Eleanor's room, arms crossed, looking annoyed. "What happened now?" Sarah explained calmly. "She slipped in the bathroom. She's okay, just a little shaken up." Jessica sighed dramatically. Of course she did. She can't even use the bathroom by herself anymore. This is ridiculous. Eleanor, sitting on her bed, looked down at her hands, shame written all over her face. Sarah felt anger rising. Accidents happen. She's fine. Jessica walked closer, looking down at Eleanor like she was an insect. "You're becoming more trouble than you're worth, you know that?" Eleanor's lip trembled. Sarah stepped between them again. "That's enough, Jessica." Jessica's eyes flashed. "No. I'm tired of tiptoeing around this. She's falling apart. She can barely function. And you're enabling her by treating her like she's normal. She's not. She's sick. She's broken. And it's time Michael faced that and did something about it." Sarah's voice was low but firm. "She's not broken. She's ill. There's a difference." Jessica laughed bitterly. "There's no difference. Either way, she shouldn't be here. She should be somewhere with people who deal with cases like hers. Not in a beautiful home where she doesn't even know where she is half the time." Eleanor started crying softly. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to scream, to push Jessica out of the room, to protect Eleanor from these horrible words. But she forced herself to stay calm. "You need to leave," Sarah said quietly. Jessica stepped closer, her face inches from Sarah's. "Or what? You'll tell Michael? Go ahead. See who he believes. His beautiful fiancée or the housekeeper who's overstepping her bounds." The two women stared at each other, tension crackling in the air. Finally, Jessica turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Sarah immediately went to Eleanor and wrapped her arms around her. Eleanor sobbed into Sarah's shoulder, her frail body shaking. "I'm so sorry," Eleanor whispered. "I'm sorry I'm so much trouble." Sarah's heart broke. "You're not trouble. You're not a burden. Don't ever think that." But the damage was done. Eleanor believed she was worthless, that she was in the way. And it was all because of Jessica's cruelty. That night, after Eleanor finally fell asleep, Sarah sat in her room and cried. She cried for Eleanor. She cried out of frustration and anger. She cried because she felt trapped and helpless. But then she wiped her tears and opened her notebook. She wrote down everything that had happened that day. Every word Jessica had said. Every moment of cruelty. And she made a decision. She couldn't stay silent anymore. She had to find a way to expose Jessica, no matter the cost. Because if she didn't, Eleanor wouldn't survive this. Not emotionally. Maybe not even physically. The mansion was quiet that night, but inside Sarah's heart, A fire was burning. She was done being invisible. She was done watching from the sidelines. It was time to fight back. And she would start by making sure the world saw Jessica for who she really was. A cruel, heartless woman hiding behind a beautiful face. The truth was coming. And Jessica had no idea. Sarah woke up the next morning with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in weeks. She had spent years being quiet, staying in the background, accepting her place as someone who didn't have a voice. But that was over now. Eleanor needed someone to fight for her, and Sarah was the only one who could do it. The house was still in the early morning silence. Sarah got up, washed her face, and went to check on Eleanor. The older woman was still asleep, her face peaceful in the dim light filtering through the curtains. Sarah stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. Eleanor looked so small, so fragile. It was hard to imagine she had once been a strong, independent woman who raised a son on her own and built a life from nothing. Alzheimer's had stolen so much from her. But Jessica was stealing even more. Her dignity, her sense of belonging, her will to keep going. Sarah wouldn't let that continue. She quietly closed the door and went downstairs to start her morning tasks. The kitchen was empty. The cook wouldn't arrive for another hour. Sarah put on a pot of coffee and began preparing Eleanor's breakfast. Oatmeal with honey and sliced bananas, the way she liked it. Warm tea with a little milk. Everything soft and easy to eat. As Sarah worked, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Jessica appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing a silk robe and looking annoyed. "You're up early," Jessica said, her tone flat. Sarah didn't look up from the stove. "Same time as always." Jessica poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching Sarah with suspicious eyes. "We need to talk." Sarah kept stirring the oatmeal. "About what?" Jessica set her cup down with a sharp clink. "About you overstepping. You're not Eleanor's daughter. You're not her nurse. You're the housekeeper. And lately, you've been acting like you run this place." Sarah finally turned to face her. "I'm taking care of someone who needs help. That's all." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "No. You're getting too attached. And it's becoming a problem." Sarah crossed her arms. "The only problem here is how you treat her." Jessica's face flushed with anger. "Excuse me?" Sarah took a breath, steadying herself. "You heard me. The way you speak to her. The way you treat her like she's nothing. It's wrong and you know it." Jessica stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I've been nothing but kind to that woman. If anyone's been cruel, it's this disease that's turned her into a shell of a person. I'm just being realistic about it." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Realistic? You mock her. You ignore her. You isolate her from everyone who cares about her. That's not realistic. That's cruel." Jessica's smile was cold and sharp. "Careful, Sarah. You're treading on very thin ice. Michael trusts me. He loves me. If I told him you were being insubordinate, disrespectful, and making up lies about me, who do you think he'd believe?" Sarah held her ground, even though her heart was pounding. "I think he'd believe the truth." Jessica laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "The truth? You mean your version of it? The version where you're the noble hero and I'm the villain? Please." Michael sees what he wants to see. And what he sees is a woman who loves him and supports him. Not some jealous housekeeper trying to cause drama. Sarah's voice was steady. "I'm not jealous. I'm worried about Eleanor. And if you cared about Michael at all, you'd be worried too." Jessica's expression turned ice cold. "I care about Michael more than you ever could. And part of caring about him is protecting him from the burden of watching his mother deteriorate every single day. She's going to get worse, Sarah. She's going to forget who he is. She's going to need round-the-clock medical care. And when that happens, she'll need to go somewhere equipped to handle it. I'm just preparing for the inevitable." Sarah shook her head. "You're not preparing for anything. You're pushing for it. You want her gone so you can have this house and Michael all to yourself." Jessica's face twisted with rage. "Get out of my sight. Now." Sarah stood there for a moment longer, then turned back to the stove, finished preparing Eleanor's breakfast, and walked out of the kitchen without another word. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't regret what she'd said. The confrontation had been building for weeks, and it was finally out in the open. Jessica now knew that Sarah wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. And that made things more dangerous. Sarah brought the breakfast tray up to Eleanor's room. The older woman was awake now, sitting up in bed looking confused. "Good morning," Sarah said gently, setting the tray on the bedside table. Eleanor looked at her with unfocused eyes. "Is it morning? I thought it was nighttime." Sarah smiled softly. "It's morning. A brand new day. Let's get you something to eat, okay?" Eleanor nodded slowly, and Sarah helped her sit up properly, placing the tray in her lap. As Eleanor ate, Sarah sat beside her, watching her carefully. Eleanor's hands trembled as she held the spoon. She was getting weaker. The stress of the past few weeks was taking a toll. Sarah's heart ached. She had to do something soon, or Eleanor wouldn't make it much longer. After breakfast, Sarah helped Eleanor get dressed and took her for a walk in the garden. It was a beautiful morning, the sun warm but not too hot, a light breeze moving through the trees. Eleanor seemed calmer outside, away from the tension of the house. They walked slowly along the stone path, Sarah holding Eleanor's arm to keep her steady. "Do you like it out here?" Sarah asked. Eleanor looked around, a small smile on her face. "It's nice. Peaceful." They sat on a bench near the fountain, and Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the sun warm her face. For a few minutes, everything felt okay. But then Eleanor opened her eyes and looked at Sarah with a strange, distant expression. "Are you my daughter?" she asked. Sarah's throat tightened. "No, sweetheart. I'm Sarah. I take care of you." Eleanor frowned, trying to remember. "Sarah," she repeated slowly, like testing the name. "Yes, Sarah. That's right." She smiled again, but the confusion lingered in her eyes. Sarah held her hand. "It's okay if you forget. That's what matters." Eleanor squeezed her hand weakly. "You're kind." "Not everyone is kind." Sarah felt tears prickling her eyes, but she blinked them away. "You deserve kindness." They sat together in the garden for a while longer, until Eleanor started to get tired. Sarah helped her back inside and settled her in her room for a nap. Once Eleanor was asleep, Sarah went back to her own room and pulled out her phone. She had been documenting everything, but she needed more. She needed something concrete, something undeniable. She decided to take a risk. That evening, Jessica was hosting a small dinner party. A few of her friends were coming over, and she had ordered Sarah and the cook to prepare an elaborate meal. Michael was still out of town, so Jessica was free to be herself. Sarah worked in the kitchen, preparing dishes and setting the table, but her mind was elsewhere. She had hidden her phone in the living room earlier, tucked behind a decorative vase on a shelf, recording. If Jessica said anything incriminating in front of her friends, Sarah would have proof. The guests arrived around 7. Sarah served drinks and appetizers, moving quietly through the room, invisible as always. Jessica and her friends talked and laughed, their voices loud and carefree. Sarah kept her head down, listening. At first, the conversation was boring. Fashion, gossip, travel plans. But then one of Jessica's friends, a woman named Claire, asked about Michael's mother. "How's Eleanor doing? I haven't seen her in ages." Jessica waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, she's fine. Well, as fine as someone with Alzheimer's can be. Honestly, it's exhausting. She barely knows where she is half the time." Claire made a sympathetic face. "That must be so hard for Michael." Jessica took a sip of wine. "It is. But he refuses to do anything about it. I keep telling him she'd be better off in a care facility, but he's too sentimental. He thinks keeping her here is the right thing to do." Another friend, a woman named Monica, chimed in. "Can't you just, I don't know, convince him? You're good at getting what you want." Jessica smirked. "I'm working on it. It's a delicate situation. I have to be patient. But trust me, once we're married and I have more say in things, she'll be out of here. I'm not spending the rest of my life living with a woman who doesn't even remember my name." The friends laughed. Claire raised her glass. "To you getting everything you want." They clinked glasses, and Sarah felt her stomach turn. She finished serving the appetizers and quietly left the room, her heart pounding. She had it. Jessica had just admitted, in front of witnesses, that she was planning to get rid of Eleanor. Sarah went to the kitchen and leaned against the counter, taking deep breaths. This was the evidence she needed. But now came the hard part. What to do with it? She couldn't just play the recording for Michael over the phone. He'd need to see it, hear it, understand it in context. And she'd need to time it perfectly. If she played it too soon, Jessica could spin it, make excuses, twist the narrative. Sarah needed to wait for the right moment. The dinner party continued late into the night. Sarah cleaned up quietly, her mind racing with plans. By the time the guests left and Jessica went to bed, it was past midnight. Sarah finally retrieved her phone from the living room and went back to her room. She locked the door, sat on her bed, and played back the recording. Jessica's voice came through clearly. Every word. Every cruel laugh. Every admission. Sarah saved the file and backed it up to her email, just in case. She had the proof. Now she just needed the perfect moment to use it. The next few days passed in tense silence. Jessica barely spoke to Sarah, and Sarah avoided her as much as possible. Eleanor seemed to sense the tension and became more withdrawn. She stopped asking questions. She stopped trying to leave her room. She just sat by the window, staring outside, lost in her own mind. Sarah stayed close, reading to her, playing music, trying to keep her spirits up. But it was getting harder. Eleanor was fading, not just physically, but emotionally. She was giving up. One night, Sarah sat beside Eleanor's bed as the older woman drifted off to sleep. Eleanor reached out and grabbed Sarah's hand. "Promise me something," Eleanor whispered, her eyes barely open. "Anything," Sarah said softly. "Don't let them forget me." Sarah's throat tightened. "I won't. I promise." Eleanor smiled faintly and closed her eyes. Sarah sat there for a long time, holding her hand, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't let this continue. She couldn't let Eleanor disappear while she was still alive. It was time to act. The next day, Michael called to say he'd be home in 2 days. He was bringing important business associates for a dinner party at the mansion. Jessica immediately went into planning mode, coordinating with caterers, florists, and decorators. She wanted everything perfect. Sarah saw an opportunity. A dinner party with guests. A public setting. If she could expose Jessica in front of people, in front of Michael, Jessica wouldn't be able to lie her way out of it. Sarah began preparing. She made sure the recording was ready. She made sure her notes were organized. And she made a decision. At that dinner party, in front of everyone, she would tell the truth. No more hiding. No more silence. Eleanor deserved justice. And Sarah was going to make sure she got it. The day of the dinner arrived. The mansion was transformed. Flowers everywhere. Candles lit. The table set with fine china and crystal glasses. Jessica looked stunning in a designer dress, her hair and makeup flawless. She moved through the house giving orders, making sure everything was perfect. Michael arrived home in the afternoon. He greeted Jessica with a kiss and asked about his mother. "She's resting," Jessica said smoothly. "She had a tough few days, so I thought it best she stay in her room tonight. We don't want her to get overwhelmed." Michael nodded, trusting her completely. "That's probably smart. I'll check on her later." Sarah overheard the conversation and felt a surge of anger. Jessica was isolating Eleanor again, keeping her hidden away like she was something to be ashamed of. But tonight, that would change. The guests began arriving at 7. Business associates, influential people, some of Michael's close friends. Everyone dressed elegantly, laughing and chatting, drinks in hand. The dining room filled with conversation and the clinking of glasses. Sarah helped serve, moving through the room quietly, watching and waiting. Jessica played the perfect hostess, charming and gracious, holding onto Michael's arm like the ideal partner. But Sarah knew the truth. And soon everyone else would too. As the main course was being served, Sarah made her move. She had positioned her phone on a side table near the dining room, connected to a Bluetooth speaker hidden behind a plant. She had everything ready. Now, she just needed the right moment. Jessica stood up to make a toast, holding her glass high. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight, she said, her voice warm and confident. Michael and I are so grateful for your support as we build our future together. Everyone raised their glasses. Michael smiled at her, proud and happy. And that's when Sarah pressed play. Jessica's voice filled the room, but not the voice she was using now. The voice from the recording. Cold, cruel, calculated. I keep telling him she'd be better off in a care facility, but he's too sentimental. Once we're married and I have more say in things, she'll be out of here. I'm not spending the rest of my life living with a woman who doesn't even remember my name. The room fell silent. Every head turned, looking for the source of the voice. Jessica's face went white. Michael's smile disappeared. The recording continued. Laughter. More cruel words. The friends toasting to Jessica getting everything she wanted. Sarah stepped forward from the corner of the room, her heart pounding but her voice steady. That's the real Jessica, she said quietly. That's who she is when you're not looking. All eyes turned to her. Michael stared at Sarah, then at Jessica, confusion and shock written all over his face. What is this? Jessica recovered quickly, her face twisting with anger. This is insane. She recorded a private conversation and is trying to— I recorded the truth, Sarah interrupted, her voice stronger now. I recorded what you really think about Eleanor. How you plan to get rid of her. How you mock her and mistreat her every single day when Michael isn't here. Michael stood up, his face pale. Is this true? Jessica's eyes darted around the room, seeing the judgment on every face. Michael, she's lying. She's been obsessed with your mother, overstepping boundaries. This is some twisted— Stop, Michael said, his voice shaking. He looked at Sarah. Tell me everything. And Sarah did. In front of all those people, she told the truth. Every cruel word. Every moment of isolation. Every time Jessica had hurt Eleanor when no one was watching. She pulled out her notebook and read from it. Dates, times, incidents. She showed the recording. She laid it all bare. The room was silent. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others looked horrified. Jessica tried to defend herself, but her words sounded hollow now. The mask had fallen, and there was no putting it back on. Michael's face transformed from confusion to rage. Get out, he said quietly. Jessica blinked. What? Get out of my house, Michael said, his voice louder now. Get out. Now. Jessica looked around the room, desperate, but no one met her eyes. She looked at Sarah with pure hatred. You've ruined everything, she hissed. Sarah met her gaze without flinching. No. I protected someone who couldn't protect herself. Jessica grabbed her purse and stormed out of the dining room. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house. The guests began to leave quietly, murmuring apologies and goodbyes. Within 20 minutes, the house was empty except for Michael and Sarah. Michael stood in the dining room, his hands on the table, his head down. I didn't know, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Sarah's voice was gentle. You do now. Michael looked up at her, tears in his eyes. Take me to my mother. Sarah led Michael upstairs to Eleanor's room. The hallway felt longer than usual, each step heavy with the weight of everything that had just happened. Michael's face was pale, his jaw tight. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a long, terrible dream and was now facing reality for the first time. Sarah knocked softly on Eleanor's door before opening it. The room was dim, lit only by a small bedside lamp. Eleanor was sitting in her chair by the window, staring out at the dark garden. She didn't turn when they entered. Mom, Michael said softly, his voice breaking on the word. Eleanor slowly turned her head. She looked at Michael with confused eyes, like she was trying to place him. Then, slowly, recognition flickered across her face. Michael, she whispered. He crossed the room quickly and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Yes, Mom. It's me. I'm here. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. You came back. Michael's voice was thick with emotion. I never should have left. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Eleanor looked at him, her frail hands trembling in his. I thought everyone forgot about me. Michael's face crumpled. He pulled his mother into a gentle embrace, and she leaned into him, crying softly. I didn't forget you. I wasn't paying attention. I was so focused on everything else that I stopped seeing what was right in front of me. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Sarah stood by the door, tears streaming down her face. She had fought so hard for this moment, and now that it was here, the relief was overwhelming. Michael pulled back and looked at his mother's face, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in months. He saw how thin she had become. How tired. How scared. What have I done? He whispered. Eleanor reached up and touched his face with a shaking hand. You're here now, she said simply. Michael nodded, unable to speak. After a few moments, he turned to look at Sarah. Thank you, he said, his voice raw. Thank you for protecting her when I didn't. Sarah wiped her eyes. She's worth protecting. Michael stood up and walked over to Sarah. I don't know how to make this right, but I want to try. Tell me what she needs. Sarah took a breath. She needs you. Not just your money or your house. She needs you to be present. To spend time with her. To talk to her even when she doesn't remember the conversation 5 minutes later. She needs to know she matters. Michael nodded. She does matter. She's my mother. She's everything. Sarah could see he meant it. The blindness was gone. He was finally seeing clearly. There's something else, Sarah said carefully. She needs consistency. She needs routine. She needs people around her who are patient and kind. The way Jessica treated her, it broke something inside her. She stopped believing she deserved love. Michael's face hardened with anger. Jessica will never come near her again. I'll make sure of it. Sarah nodded. Good. Michael looked back at his mother, who was watching them both with tired eyes. I'll hire the best caregivers. Round-the-clock care. Whatever she needs. Sarah shook her head gently. She doesn't need strangers. She needs people who care. People she trusts. Michael looked at Sarah with understanding. She trusts you. Sarah nodded. I'll stay with her as long as she needs me. Michael's voice was quiet but sincere. Not as the housekeeper. As family. That's what you are to her. That's what you are to me now. Sarah felt emotions swell in her chest. Thank you. The next few weeks brought massive changes to the mansion. Jessica's belongings were packed up and removed. Michael called off the engagement publicly, though he never explained exactly why. Rumors spread, but he didn't care. His focus was on his mother. He rearranged his work schedule to be home more. He started having breakfast with Eleanor every morning. He would sit with her in the afternoons and talk to her, even when she forgot who he was. He read to her. He walked with her in the garden. He was present in a way he hadn't been in years. Eleanor began to improve, not in her memory, which continued to fade, but in her spirit. She smiled more. She seemed less afraid. She started asking questions again, reaching out to people instead of shrinking away. Sarah continued to care for her, but now she wasn't alone. Michael was there, learning how to be patient, how to speak gently, how to comfort his mother when she was confused. He learned that love wasn't about fixing someone or solving their problems. Sometimes love was just about being there. One afternoon, Michael found Sarah in the kitchen making tea. Can we talk? He asked. Sarah nodded, and they sat down at the table. Michael looked serious. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About how blind I was. How I let someone cruel into my life and didn't see it. Sarah listened quietly. I trusted the wrong person, Michael continued. And I ignored the right one. You saw what was happening, and you risked everything to protect my mother. Most people wouldn't have done that. Sarah shook her head. Most people would have. They just need the courage to speak up. Michael smiled sadly. Maybe, but you did speak up. And I'll never forget that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. This is for you. Sarah took it cautiously. What is it? Open it. Inside was a check. Sarah's eyes widened when she saw the amount. Michael, I can't. He held up his hand. Yes, you can. It's not payment. It's a thank you. And it's an investment in your future. I know you've spent years working for other people, putting your own life on hold. This is your chance to do something for yourself if you want. Go back to school. Start a business. Whatever you want. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the check. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. You earned it. Sarah looked at him with tears in her eyes. Thank you. But I'm not leaving Eleanor. Not yet. Michael smiled. I know. And I'm grateful for that. But when the time comes, when she doesn't need as much care, or when she's no longer with us, I want you to have options. You've given so much of yourself. You deserve something in return. Sarah wiped her eyes and nodded. Thank you, Michael. For seeing me. For believing me. I should have seen you sooner, he said quietly. As the months passed, life in the mansion found a new rhythm. Eleanor's condition continued to decline slowly, but she was surrounded by love. She had good days and bad days. Some days she knew exactly who everyone was. Other days she thought Michael was her husband or Sarah was her sister. But it didn't matter. They loved her anyway. Jessica tried to contact Michael several times, but he blocked her number. She sent letters that he never opened. Eventually, she stopped trying. She had moved on to someone else, already planning her next perfect life. But Michael was done with perfect. He had learned that real love wasn't about appearances or convenience. It was about showing up, even when things were hard. It was about protecting the people who couldn't protect themselves. It was about seeing beyond the surface. One evening, Michael and Sarah were sitting with Eleanor in the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Eleanor was between them on the bench, holding both their hands. This is nice, Eleanor said softly. Yes, it is, Michael agreed. Eleanor turned to Sarah. You're my daughter, aren't you? Sarah smiled gently. I'm Sarah. But I love you like a daughter loves a mother. Eleanor nodded, content with that answer. Good. I love you too. Michael looked at Sarah over his mother's head, and they shared a smile. This was family. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Later that night, after Eleanor was asleep, Michael stood in his office looking at an old photo of his mother from years ago. She was young, strong, full of life. He felt a deep sadness for everything the disease had taken from her. But he also felt grateful. Grateful that Sarah had been brave enough to fight for her. Grateful that he had woken up before it was too late. Grateful for the time he still had. He made a silent promise to his mother. He would be there for her until the end. He would make sure she felt loved every single day. He would never take her for granted again. And when she was gone, he would remember not just who she used to be, but who she was now. A woman who deserved dignity, respect, and love, regardless of what she could or couldn't remember. That was the lesson Sarah had taught him. That loyalty wasn't about what someone could give you. It was about standing beside them when they had nothing left to give. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Every Mind Stories. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Comment loyalty matters if you stand with those who protect the vulnerable. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the people with the smallest voices need the loudest advocates. Thank you for watching. Remember, real love shows up when things get hard. That's when it matters most.